How's everyone? Good. Well, thank you for having me. I almost didn't make it here today, not because I missed a flight or overslept, but because this was not the career for me. See, like many of the people my age, I wanted to be an astronaut. When I was young and I saw the space program, it personified technology, and it built something in me that I still think today of what you can do when you put your mind to it. And I distinctly remember watching humans walk on the moon and tugging at my dad's pant leg. I remember looking up at him and I said, "Dad, when I'm your age, I'm going to be walking on the moon." It was so logical for me. That didn't happen. But what did happen was my dad, who worked at RCA's David Sarnoff Research Center in Princeton, New Jersey, he brought home a piece of space-age tech to me. It was this calculator. In 1972, the HP 35, named for the 35 buttons on the front, was the first scientific calculator you could buy. It cost about $400 then, which is kind of like $3,000 today. And my dad did not want to get in trouble. So he made us come into his bedroom where he had it plugged in the wall. And he said, "Look, you can touch it, but only with one finger and the other hand behind the back." And I was so enamored by it, I was like, okay, what can I do? And for whatever reason, at 7 years old, my sevens times tables was hard for me. So I asked this thing, 7 times 7 entered, and it thought about it, and it gave me the answer. What? I was blown away. So now I tried the largest number, the largest calculation I knew in my entire existence, which was 12 times 12. By the way, why do they stop times tables at 12? Like, it's strange, right? So I entered that in, and it thought about it, seemed like a little bit longer, and popped back 144. I was like, oh my God. Like, how is it doing this? So then I had this like moment where I thought to myself, what if I ask it a question I don't know the answer to? And I remember typing in 123 times 123, and it came back with an answer. For whatever reason, I still remember today, 15129, which was my passcode for a while. And I didn't know if it was right, but I did know it was shocking. And I said to my dad, I'm like, "Dad, you're the engineer. How does it do it?" And he looked down at me, he goes, "Son," you know those moments when you get to teach your kids something, you learn something from your dad? This was one of those moments. And he looks down at me and goes, "Son, that's a great question." He goes, "What they do is they take these pictures of wires and they shrink them down and they put them on a thing. It's called a chip. And they put the chip inside the calculator and it does the math." I'm like, okay, so it's wires, huh? And my dad's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "But Dad," he's like, "What? How can wires think?" And my dad's like, "That's a great question." "Well, wires can think." God, Steve, I don't know how wires think. And two things happened to me in that moment. One, my dad didn't know the answer to a question, which was the first time in my entire existence, which made me think the world's probably a lot bigger place, full of new surprises and ideas. And second, it made me fall in love with the idea that wires could think and that it was going to change the world. My dad also told me that computers, which he didn't call this yet to be, was what made it possible for humans to travel to the moon. It enabled us to do something we couldn't do on our own. And I fell in love with this. I couldn't wait to be an astronaut. But 5 years later, I ended up getting a pair of glasses. Couldn't see the chalkboard. Do they still use chalk? And somebody told me, "Steve, you can't be an astronaut." It's like, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, in those days, to be an astronaut, you needed first to be a pilot. And to be a pilot, you needed perfect vision. And I didn't have perfect vision. And my dream of going to the moon kind of died in that deficit." My dad saw how sad I was, because I was like depressed for a week or so. And he brought home from work this new piece of technology. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. This is one of the first home computers you could build with a soldering iron, which I did and fell in love with. And this enabled me to program a device to do what I asked it to do. The thought of that when I was a young kid was remarkable. And frankly, it's still remarkable today. But the idea that I actually understood computers in my age gave me a leg up on so many other people. It eventually, after a while, led to my job at Apple, after I was working as an engineer at Raytheon. This is my first business card they gave to me because my Apple business cards weren't ready. And I never considered myself a rocket scientist until they handed me this card. So technically I should put that on my CV. This is really my real first business card, where I was working on a strategic partnership between Apple and the Harvard Business School, which is for another presentation. But here's what was so cool. I got a chance to meet one of my heroes and work for him. And I took the occasion to ask him a question that I always wanted the answer to. And I said, Steve, why did you start a computer company in the first place? And he told me two things. One, he said he was dismayed, that was not the word he used, that computers were locked away behind doors, and that to use them, humans had to approach with reverence what he called the white-coated lords of the computer room. Again, he used different terms. Who had all the access to the technology, and they were the ones that had the power. And so he thought, what if we could democratize this and give this power to everyone? What would humanity be like? That was thing one. Thing two, in the early 70s, he read this article, and on my website, I've linked the interview we had about this. This article in Scientific American did this calculation. It was the amount of energy it takes to move an object from point A to point B. And it turned out that humans, that first red dot right under sheep, were not that efficient on their own. But when you build a bicycle, nothing else we've ever created produced the same amount of efficiency. And so Steve, for a while, had to create a new metaphor for computers, because what are computers to early users? So he came up with this metaphor and marketed it, called a bicycle for the mind, which is kind of a cool metaphor. And here's a secret most people don't know. The Macintosh was actually codenamed Macintosh. The real product name was going to be the Apple Bicycle. Steve got overruled by his own team. He was out of town when they did that. By the way, that's why Macintosh is spelled wrong. It should be MCI, but that's a whole other thing. So we actually used this in the education market. We called it Wheels for the Mind, and we gave computers away at cost to universities in return for young minds to produce the software that would make them better. But I need to be honest with you. When I started with computers, there was no need for a computer. There was no good reason a single human should ever have one in their home. Full stop. Today, we can't live without them. Let's be honest. They're in our elementary schools, they're in our colleges, they're in our workplace. And those are just the ones that you see and interact with. They're embedded in our televisions and our remote controls. They're embedded in our cars. How many people tried to buy a car during COVID only to find out there weren't enough computer chips to build cars? They're in our ovens. They're in our cash registers. And of course, all of you using them, they're in your phones. Life would be unimaginable without computers. And computers work on your behalf all the time. In fact, to get here, a computer assigned an airplane to a gate and helped you find your way to it. A computer helped pilots fly the plane, and for a short portion of it, maybe most of the flight in some cases, the computers flew the plane. Computers tracked your luggage to your gate, assigned and air-conditioned your hotel room. You probably used a computer today to pay for your coffee. And I'm guessing maybe some of you let a computer drive you here today. I'm looking at you. Well, here's the thing. All this technology, which has been embedded in all our devices, has just set up what I believe is an even new and more powerful revolution. And that is the idea of wellness awareness. Because now, for the first time, normal people are buying health devices with their own money and learning about what's happening to their bodies. This has never happened before. Right? They understand how their fitness looks. They understand what their blood pressure is like. They understand their blood sugar levels. Some people I know are even buying glucose monitors who don't have diabetes just to see what that spoon of pudding does to their body. They're using it to track their heart rate. I mean, how many people 5 years ago ever thought that you'd be able to take an ECG on your wrist? Like, this really is technology from the future. And the other amazing thing about it is, Very healthy humans, athletes in many cases, are using the exact same tools to track their health, right? To perform better, to recover better, to sleep better. It's incredible. This is my son, Eric, who just finished the Boston Marathon. He came in the top 1% of all runners. He claims that it's part genetics and part the Garmin smartwatch on his wrist, which he uses religiously to get better. And the same tools provide this awareness to themselves and their families that if something bad actually does happen, they've got a backup. This generation's got a better picture of what's happening to their health in their pockets than any other in history. They probably have a better picture than that their physician have. And guess what? They're starting to share this with their loved ones. Another first. You now kind of know what's happening to another human being you care about because the device on their body is sharing that information. And yes, they're starting to share this with their physician. Now, I know the challenge here. Physicians are already overworked. Many of them don't want to see all this data. But let's also be honest, too much data is a problem for too few physicians. There's never been, and there never will be, such a thing as too much data for algorithms. Which brings us to the elephant in the room, and the thing that's probably hanging over this whole conference, which is, will AI take my job? Steve, these computers are great until they're not. Well, look, these are just some pictures I took from last week's articles. This is a real thing. It is real scary, but it's also been something we've dealt with before. I want to make it a little bit personal. This is my son, Jonah. He's a pair of twins. You saw Eric. He matched a month ago yesterday in his top program for radiology at Dartmouth. We're super proud of him, and we're over the moon. But radiology used to be this mechanical science. This was the first nuclear magnetic imaging machine. And being a physicist, I still think this is science fiction, that a magnetic field can move a dipole in a body and that a machine can understand what that image looks like when it flips back into its normal state. But it's no longer analog. Computers run most of the equipment in the radiology suite. And Jonah would not have a career if not for computers. So let's bring it real down to earth. There's his parents, very proud of him when he matched. We did a little math because Jonah's wife, Emma, is pregnant. We're expecting my first grandchild in 2 weeks. I actually think it's coming this Friday, but that's just a bet. I also think it's a girl, but that's another thing. We did the math because he's worried about budgets. And we looked at how much money he's going to pay back for the privilege of becoming a doctor of radiology. And I'm astounded, but also surprised that we could make it happen. He's going to end up paying back that much money to become a doctor of radiology. So if you really want to see the numbers, I have the whole spreadsheet. So ask yourself, am I worried? Should we be worried that a robot is going to take Jonah's job? I don't think so. In fact, I think of all the industries he could be in, radiology is the best one to assign computers. Because let's face it, Jonah's eyes are never going to be as good as a computer looking for minute changes in an image. And frankly, as I mentioned, computers were necessary for the career to begin with. So he has a career thanks to computers. Park that for a second. The AI and computer genie is never going back in the bottle. I actually think we need to recognize that it's already in use today, right? AI is being used to transcribe and translate patient notes on the fly, a job a human used to do. It's checking for potentially dangerous drug interactions so that we make sure we're doing the right thing all the time, especially as the names of drugs get more unique and sound almost the same. Just today, Microsoft and Epic announced an integration of GPT-4 in the EMS system, the EHR system, so that they can force multiply busy doctors, at least initially with responding to emails. So if you think about where AI is going, like I couldn't imagine when I was a kid looking at humans walk on the moon, we'd be having these devices we have on our wrist, but I can't imagine what's going to happen next. I think that computers and AI will enable busy doctors to dispatch thousands of virtual interns to help more people at lower cost. I think they'll help doctors look through lots of patient data that they couldn't have time to do before, so they can look for population changes. They will be able to summarize new research. They'll be able to run new research studies in days instead of months. They'll be able to look for pending health conditions before they become an issue. And they'll probably dispatch generative AI tools and chatbots to people so they have a lifelong relationship with their client, their patient, not only seeing them when they're sick, which is also a challenge for doctors. And this is not science fiction, this is science fact. Today, you can buy a tool from Buy Now or Neurologic that uses the camera that's already in a patient's phone to run a baseline vital scan looking at blood behind their eyes. This is also from Star Trek. 3 months ago, you could buy a home urinalysis kit to detect what's in your urine. Never thought you'd say that 3 months ago. And as of yesterday, you can now buy a device that uses technology from the space age, phased array radar, to scan a room looking for people and potential hazards and what's happening to them at their home in the event they might fall. This is our product, FedAlarm.com. We're using a new type of AI we call ambient intelligence, which uses the sensors you already have in your home, in your car, on your body, in your pocket, to paint a picture of what's normal for you and tell someone who cares about you something that you might need to intervene. Let me finish where I started. This is my dad. He started this whole thing. His career was a draftsman. He started using mechanical tools to design other mechanical devices. And he worked in rooms like this with paper and tape and erasers. And this is what a typical draftsman room looked like. It was not very ergonomic, and yet this was the best we could do. Near the end of my dad's career, he actually started using the same analog tools to design electronic devices. He had one of these things in our kitchen because he was freelancing in the 70s when inflation was much higher than it is now. And I got to see him do this. He put little stickers down and run black tape and make the lines, which he then would shrink down and print into a circuit. That's where the term printed circuit came from. And this was inside that calculator my dad brought home. But here's what happened. My dad inadvertently helped create the computer tool that came for his job. And I remember when he was exactly as old as I am now, he was worried about being put out of a job because a CAD system was going to take his desk. And you know what? It was going to take his desk. CAD systems are much better than paper tape. And you know what my dad did? I was working for Apple at the time, and I encouraged this, but he took the instinct. He learned the tool. This was the product called Ashlar Vellum. Design and drafting software that thinks. That's how they sold it. And he taught all the other draftsmen at RCA how to use this tool, which freed them up to create new designs. They could start from templates versus starting from scratch. And it allowed him to do things he always wanted to do, but never had the time to. Proud of my dad. He also extended his career about a dozen years because he embraced new technology. Look, new technology comes all the time. I believe in the hands of medical professionals like these, it's only going to help enhance care, reach more people, lower cost, and produce better outcomes. Steve Jobs called a computer a bicycle for the mind. I think that our children will think of them as rocket ships for the mind, and that they will take our children places our parents could never imagine. I'm so excited that I was able to present some of this today and to be part of this group that's going to change the world. Thank you.